This is my world where I spend my evenings. My wife sits in the chair over there. We got the TV going, and I'm painting over on the, you can see an art table there. So what I'm going to do today is demonstrate how I begin a painting, use an ancient method based on the classical past. And I picked up tips from the Impressionists too, but it's sort of a hybrid combination. This is a finished painting that I did. For me, it's rather impressionist. I think it's on canvas. And I did it based on a photograph that I took in Giverny in 2019. My wife and I toured around France, and we were lucky enough to go to Monet's gardens. You have to go there. So this is a finished painting. Give you an idea what it will look like. My next painting will look like when it's finished, which it won't be today. It takes too long. I work in a step-by-step method, and that's how we teach. This is a photograph I'm going to use. It's another one, another view. We walked around several times, and I was snapping photos with my iPhone, and I just printed those out. And I've got several, and this has been a project I've been working on. Pictures from France. We went to Giverny. We went to Normandy. We went to Paris. We went to Nice and Lyon, and took lots of pictures, and I've got lots of subject matter. So this is a finished painting. Hold it a little closer, and that's the kind of thing that I would end up with. What I'm going to show you today is my step-by-step method. And I have the same photograph taped up here to this panel. What this is here, and I'm going to demonstrate this further, this is what I call a grisaille or grisaille, Grisaille. In France, they call it grisaille. In England, they call it grisaille. And because this is a French scene, I'm going to call it grisaille today. It's a tonal study. My grisailles generally aren't very elaborate. Some of the ones you'll see in museums could be almost like black and white photographs, and they were done from Renaissance days on. And it was a way of capturing a value study, capturing the shapes and working out compositions. And often they would do a full-size grisaille of a painting. And we saw several in Lyon and in the Louvre, that sort of thing. They did what they call cartoons, which were sketches in chalk or ink, that sort of thing, and then did a full-size grisaille or a scaled-down model of it. They were doing a big mural, then they blow it up, do a grid system and all. But it was a way of figuring out what you're going to do and building it step by step. Like you're an architect and you're working on building a building, you have to go step by step. You can't start putting the roof on until you've got the foundation and all. So this is foundational. So I'm going to show you exactly what my thinking was when I was doing this. And this is what I teach also. I'm using oil paint here and a palette. I don't arrange it. Some artists are very meticulous about it. I kind of stick it wherever it is, but I have usually a dark green, which is called Viridian, and this is a bright green, should be next to it, but I ran out of room. I'm not organized. This is called permanent green light. Viridian is very dark blue green. I've got a dark blue called ultramarine blue, and I use a warm brown called I can use raw umber. This is burnt umber. A little black. I've started using black a little bit. I stayed away from it, but I do use it a bit. It's burnt sienna, which is a rusty red. This is rose madder, which is a lighter version of alizarin crimson. This is a bright red, which is cadmium red. This is a cadmium light and yellow, and this is yellow ochre, which is earth color, and white. So the earth colors are this one here, the yellow ochre, the brown and burnt umber. And for years, artists would use white. They use that's my dog. They use a white, often lead white. So when you cook lead, it can turn white, and they would use this yellow ochre, which is usually minerals. They would use black, which is obviously charcoal, and they would use a red, which is probably full of iron or something. So that was their palette. They had black and the red and the yellow ochre, and they managed to mix these together and get variants. You got greens, and the whole Sistine Chapel was done with these colors. So you can mix these together and kind of get an orangey color. You can mix this with the black and get a bluish color, and you can mix the black and the no, actually not bluish color. You would get a bluish color if you put white in this, and you mix these two together, you get a greenish color. So anyway, enough of that. We have all these other wonderful colors that came along during the time of the Impressionists, when science started making bright colors, and that's why the palettes exploded with color, and the young Impressionists started experimenting with these tube colors, and they weren't doing what their elders did. But I do respect their elders, and their elders did use, oh great, there goes my dog wanting to go out. I might have to let him out for a second. The dog rules. So you can see here, okay, Papa, I'm coming. My little doggy, my little Yorkie is whining. It's a second, Papa. Anyway, so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm adding some dark color, and I'm corresponding it to this area in here. I'm thinking of darks and lights of the value scale. The value scale, the scale I use, number 10, it would be black, and white would be number 1, for example. In the middle, of number 5, gray, was, as you can imagine, a medium gray. So this is a kind of scale that I follow, but I'm using brown instead of black and white. I'm not going to add any white to this. I'm just trying to get an idea where I am. I'm trying to find my way here. You might be able to see I've sketched out in charcoal pencil the outlines of my trees here. And I'm trying to approximate the values, the darks and lights that I see. This gives me a foundation to work from. Now, sometimes I'm not as careful about doing the grisaille. I will just do a very, very quick wash and then go right into color. So mine is a modified grisaille. Some of the ones that our ancestors did were very elaborate and very, very exacting. But I'm always anxious to get into color. I love color, and I want to get to painting. So if it was too tedious, I don't want to do it. It's not fun. I don't like. I don't do very exacting outlines. Some artists are very linear. If they do a still life, for example, they say you have to nail everything, get it right in place, right where it belongs, and you proceed. You don't change. But I'm always changing things. No, I'm working in. I used to work with a classic mix. I had a book of the old masters' methods, and the classic mix of a medium was turpentine, which comes from pine trees, pine sap. It's refined from that, and it's a medium for oils. Linseed oil, which is classic, of course, and Damar varnish. And you mix those together in equal amounts, and it was a great medium. But I found that I was doing very detailed still lifes, and I found that to get the detail I wanted, and I'm obsessively detail oriented, or I was when I could really see without these glasses, and my hands weren't so stiff. I got some, I don't know why, I was like working like a brain surgeon. It's just me, I don't know. I would use less and less of the varnish and the linseed oil, and I finally ended up using the turpentine That's very smelly stuff. Okay. And I've since switched to odorless mineral spirits. Gamsol and other artistic versions of that can be had in art stores. They're highly refined and there's minimal smell. A regular mineral spirits is very smelly. And it's not good to breathe. I use a very small little baby jar, and I don't get a lot of evaporation. So, when I teach it, if people are sensitive, I recommend that they use either acrylics in my classes or water mixable oils. And they're emulsified oils that work just like oil paint. You can mix them with oil if you want. You can mix them with other paints because they have oil in them, but you can mix them with water. And so my students prefer that. And that's fine. It's a wonderful new product they have.
Thank you.
But I just use the oil because I grew up using it and I've always liked it. And I've liked the fact that you can move it around. You can paint wet into wet. And the acrylics were often used if I was doing illustration work or that sort of thing when I was in commercial art and advertising. I would use something that was quick drying.
Jared, it looked like you were dipping your brush into something.
Yeah, this is my old baby jar, and it's got mineral spirits in it. And I used a little drop of something called Japan dryer, which is probably a lot of artists might be shaking their heads. Don't do that. But I'm a trial and error. I'll just jump off into the unknown. It makes paint dry faster. I often recommend something called Liquin, which also is alkyd-based dryer. And there's several other kinds of dryers you can add to make the paint dry faster. A lot of the artists who are professional artists working in galleries, and they suddenly told, well, we're going to move your show up a month and we need 25 paintings, and they're working night and day. Well, they need the paint to dry, so they add Liquin or they dry something like that. And I found that the Japan dryer was what you put in house paint. And I've read many articles on what not to do, and they say never do that. I do it. Or never add anything. Don't add any additives. Don't add this or that. And I said, well, why not? And then I've had good luck doing what they said not to do. Also, they say wait 6 months before you varnish your paintings. And I think in the old days, that makes sense, or if you're working very thick. But my paintings dry to the touch. I varnish, I spray varnish it. I've never had anything peel or crack, but I'm not working really thick. So if there's a rule, I'm the kind of person who says, okay, you're giving me a rule. Why is that rule? I'm just not going to do it because you say to do it. I'm going to test it out. I'm a skeptic, not that I'm a radical painter at all, but I'm kind of a skeptic. And I found some of the things that you would see in art magazines or art books about what to do and not to do. I find they're not, it doesn't, waiting 6 months to varnish a painting, I never got anything done that way. Paintings stacked up everywhere because I'm always working on paintings. So the next step I'm going to show you, I'm not going to do the whole Grisaille, of course, but time is limited. But what I'm going to do is show you how I start laying color in. I've got another canvas I'm going to bring up, which is more complete. But wherever I see a dark color, my phone keeps dinging. Oh, nothing. I'm using brown. I like to use brown as a mixing color. Some people use black. If I were to darken green, for example, I can add brown to it. Brown is made really on the color wheel for mixing all the colors. You mix all the colors, you got a nice muddy brown color. Well, they thoughtfully already given me a nice muddy brown color called burnt umber, and it used to be mineral based. I don't know how they make it now, but see, I can darken a color very easily. If I'm painting an apple, I can use the bright red for the apple if it's a red apple, and I could add the brown to it to get the shadow side. So I'm thinking in terms of light and shade also all the time. This is the light coming down for this direction, It's coming from upper right and hitting all these objects in, all this vegetation. You can see where the shadow side is on the left, and then on the right side you have a light coming down. So I'm cognizant of that. I always keep a mental image of where the light's coming from. If I'm doing a still life or anything, it all has to be logical. I take photographs of objects and fruits and vegetables and things, and I use those, and I have objects that I've got all sorts of objects in our collection of carvings and things, and I put those together with my still lifes, and I have to make sure if the light's coming from the right direction. You can't have them come from left and right. I don't have room in my little studio to really set up still lifes close enough to me. I suppose I could if I was put my mind to it, but I like to work from the photographs. The light source is even. It's usually the sunlight coming on a bunch of plums lined up. I just line them up on the table or something outside. So nice bright light. I get a nice clear picture, good color, and then I use that and I pop those into my still lifes, and a lot of times with a scenery in the background or with kind of a made up background, and I assemble them that way. And then if I want to get the detail, I get some real grapes or plums or whatever I'm using, stick it in front of me to get all the detail. So I worked with photographs quite a bit because I can work on several projects at one time. So you see, I mixed some of this bright green and some of the brown. I get a nice shadow color, very easy. Another way to do it is to mix red and green together. And you can also get a shadow color that way. It'll darken it because they're complements. They're complementary colors. So I can get a shadow color that way. The red and green also make a dark green. If I want to make a dark yellow, I can add purple because they're opposite in the color wheel. If I want to darken blue, I would use orange because they're opposite on the color wheel. Red, yellow, you mix them all together, you get brown. That's how it works. So I won't go to the whole color wheel thing. That's the first lesson. For my beginning class or my beginners, I do a real quick color wheel demonstration. I prefer to get everybody painting, doing something that they want to paint, really are interested in. We might start in my studio class at the Art League. I started with a still life. Everybody would paint the still life. So we work out form shadows, which is here. This is a form shadow, cast shadows, and color mixing, and then go on to photographs of individual, whatever you want to paint. You want to paint your dog, you want to paint your daughter, you want to paint a water scene, whatever you want. The photographs would be the light, would be the source, and then we would work on that individually. And I go around the room and help people find the color they want to find, and help them with their brushmanship and all that as best I can. My aim always with my students is to help them find their own way. I don't force people into painting like I paint, or I want them to learn the fundamentals so they have, which is a lifelong, really. I'm still learning fundamentals, always a student, but find out, do you want to paint real quick and thick paint? That's good. If you want to paint forever with tiny brushes and do detail, that's fine. But the fundamentals will be the same. How to get your lights and darks, how to create form. And if you want to do something really off, I want to do an abstract, that's fine too. And I'll show you, get the colors you want. It's all good. It's all good. I don't have a rigid curriculum at all. I just started, I have right now usually about 5 or 6 students in my online class, which allows me to go around the room, the virtual room, and spotlight different artists, and we share what we're doing with other artists and comment on it and offer suggestions, and I can help people if they're a little bit stuck. A lot of times it's mixing colors. They get stuck.
I think what I like about your class when it was in person, I'm sure you've replicated online, is I love just the different themes that everyone's drawing.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, drawing, painting.
Yeah, they're painting what they want to paint,
Yeah.
and the way they want to paint. I try to. Everybody's on their own journey in life, and uh, so If we paint the same subject, usually it's a still life. Everybody's got their own version of it, and I'm not too rich about making a perfect composition, or saying you have to. I mean, I help them. This is how you can hold the brush, and this is how you can do detail, and this is how you can do. But I get the fundamentals more or less introduced, and then doing what you want to do, and that's what you're going to do the rest of your life. If you want to do art, you're going to find your own way anyway. You know, you're going to find your own style. It's going to find you. I'm convinced all of us have an own inbred aesthetic for music, for clothing, for color, for our lifestyle is our style. So it's we're all sort of I think help people expose and give them permission to experiment and not to be afraid of failing, because I fail every day when I paint. Goof it up. The paint won't lay down the way I want it to. I can't seem to get it, and I tell people, well, maybe the paint is fighting you today. Do what you can today, let it dry, and generally, sometimes, well, that was a nice underpainting. Sometimes you get 3 or 4 underpaintings before you get what you want. Just be patient and keep building on it and revising it. So many people, students say, well, if I screw this up, the painting's going to be ruined. I have to burn the canvas. And you just started it. You're fine. Oh, I'm terrible. Well, you're starting out. This is something new. And if you have the same attitude you had when you were a kid, learning to write letter forms. I mean, we all learned the same way, and we had a teacher, and we were trying to make the lines, and we're all clumsy. I think with kids, though, they're not so self-critical. They're just they keep trying. With adults, we're all embarrassed all the time if we're not geniuses, and I think
you don't learn unless you fail.
You have to. Failure is, and you see that in Silicon Valley. They encourage failure. If you're not failing, you're not trying. We don't want some pat thing that you've been doing for 10 years. And that's not getting us anywhere. We're pioneers here. I mean, we're in the unknown all the time here in Silicon Valley. We're reinventing things all the time. So start inventing. Not just doing the same thing. But failure means you're learning, and
I think we forget that sometimes.
Yeah. Well, especially adults. I've had people that were really the top of their game in real estate or law or whatever, and they try to paint and they're just in anguish. I know how they feel, because my wife said, well, sign up for some guitar lessons. I used to play folk guitar in college, and I can play some chords, and I like to sing. It was a lot of fun. And she thought I'd enjoy it. And the guy who was teaching it was this maestro who could do classic guitar and run his fingers up and down doing scales and all these bar chords. And my old stiff fingers, they're really stiff now in my old age, I just couldn't keep up with it. I was I know how my students would feel when they're failing. I'm just missing the chords. It was buzzing. I didn't have the strength anymore. I'm getting better at it, but I know how they feel, so I took a couple semesters, and I'm still going through all that material.
You should look for an online guitar class. Someone was telling me that Fender actually has a really good library of online guitar classes.
Yeah, I like that. I was looking on it some, but I think every guy thinks they like to play lead guitar in a rock band.
Not too late.
But it's just like everybody would hear. I mean, how many pianos did they sell when people go to piano concerto and some fabulous artist is playing, and they think, oh, I'm going to do that. And they buy a piano and they have 3 or 4 lessons, and it sits there forever until some kid or relative it was a genius. It was like Rocket Man.
Elton John.
But Elton, when Elton John was a kid, he sat down, he was playing, he was a natural. So this thing been sitting there getting dusty, and he's doing this when he's a kid because he's a genius, And so pianos do get used, but a lot of us have dreams of glory, and you have to, realize that maybe that's not your thing. But with art, I encourage people just to find something that's comfortable for them, that they enjoy doing, finding themselves, and something they can do, and you'll find something. I still play my guitar. I play along with, we have chords. I can play along with the Eagles and sing along with them, put it on, and I have the chord. I can do that.
Be careful. I might ask for a concert next.
Well, when Steve and his girlfriend Karen
yes.
would bring their guitars, and I could kind of follow along in my own way because they bring extras. We had fun. It was simple chords, and they had them on his iPad, and I could sing along or try to. I really enjoy it. I'm a bit of a ham that way, especially harmony singing. I like that. In college, we did folk singing in those days, Kingston Trio and Harry Belafonte and all that, and Limelighters. We had more fun with it. So you can see what I'm doing here as I'm babbling. You see I'm putting some of the lights in, which was I was using the yellow and the bright green, very simple, and mixing them together. I had a little bit of the dark in there and some intermediate tones, and I'm just dabbing away at it and building up. I wasn't thinking about structure about my brush marks too much. I'm not trying to, I'm not worried about that. I'm just trying to get my colors in. So this is one's a little bit further along. And you can see how I started to build on the grisaille, and I can continue on with the same method here. I'm just using a couple of brushes like this. This is called a filbert. It's got a little rounded tip. I like these filberts. This is a number 4. Of course, the numbers, this is a number 4 too, and they're pretty close. I think they measure the ferrule, but there's a variety of. Here's number 5, a little bit bigger. It depends on the manufacturer, but I like the filberts because they have a rounded tip, and I like the. This is called a bright here, and there's ones that are called flats that are a little bit longer, like that. I wasn't holding it up, was I? It's a bright. And then for detail, I use really pointed brushes like this. These are called riggers. So if I'm going to paint the trunks of the trees and all that, I get the rigger brush out. You do a fine line with that. And when I'm painting my little still lifes, I get some really tiny little brushes. And I was using the watercolors in the old days when I was in college. I was painting these little still lifes with tiny little brushes like that on panels, selling these things. I had an agent down I started off in Shreve and Company. And there's my dog barking. I might have to get him in now. he kind of rules the house, Doggies are, I'll be right there, Papa. But how I started, I would work in my dad's office. He was on Union Square, 291 Geary, Suite 600, Raymond L. Signs and Associates. And all it was, by the time I got there, was himself. He had a art director, and sometimes he had a friend of his that kind of used one of the offices, but he had his own little. Guy had a lot of money, and they were buddies, and he let him use the office. And sometimes he'd bring a client in. For years, all through in high school and college, my dad taught me the trade. So one semester, unfortunately had a motorcycle accident, and it was in the summertime, and my dad says, "Why don't you just take off a semester and come to the office and paint?" Because we were always painting together. We'd go landscape painting. We'd do stuff around the house. So I said, fine. And there were some artists in Shreve's window who were doing these little exquisite little still lifes. Gerald Stinsky and Alan Prum, and they were like the old masters paintings. They were immaculate, and there was such a challenge to me. How did they do that? And so I got some panels down at Flax's and some watercolor brushes, sables, and started painting these things. And I painted a few of them and got in the window. And the painting that's in my show of the chicken and the egg,
Yeah.
that was one that was in Shreve's too. I kept that one. Anyway, hang on, my dog is
Yeah, it's okay.
making noise here.
You're gonna have to introduce us to him.
Yeah, you got to see Papa.
You got to copy.
Papa is a art dog. Yeah, Papa is my loyal little companion. Okay, here's Papa. He's a little Yorkie. He's about, oh gosh, we think he's about 12 or 13, but he came to us via my son. My son had a friend who was he was a male. He was breeding, and he had a female, and they were making these Yorkie puppies and selling them. Not my son, but this friend, a female friend of his. And so Papa was a real Papa. And they created a big litter, and it was so noisy and chaotic at this lady's house. He says, "Can you bring Papa home?" So, and my son said, my son was living at home at the time and working. So it'll be 3 or 4 weeks. I said, fine. So it's been like 12 years. And he visits his original family, and he goes stays with my son's living in San Jose now.
I think Papa has a good life.
Papa's got a good life. Yeah. We love Papa. My wife, this is the baby. My wife is very maternal. And so she fusses over Papa. Gave him a bath yesterday, and so he's looking pretty good. Anyway, so I'm putting my lights in, and I'm going to adjust the color a little bit. It came out a little bit too green, so I'm going to put yellow ochre in with it. Yellow ochre is a good mixing color if I want to darken a yellow. The palette I'm using is 2 greens, a dark and a light. I often have cerulean blue, and I didn't put some. I might have to if I do the sky here. A dark blue, which is ultramarine, and a cerulean blue, which I think I should do that now, which is a yellow or warmer blue. And so dark and light, and with a red as alizarin crimson or rose madder, and a bright red of some kind, like this. This is cadmium red, deep, they say. It doesn't look that deep. With yellow, I just use the regular yellow, and brown is usually burnt umber, sometimes raw umber. Burnt umber is a little redder, so it's a great mixing color. Like I said, make things darker and muddier. In paint, you have a hue, which is the name of the color. This is the hue is called permanent green light. This hue is called viridian. This hue is called cerulean blue. You have the value, which I've demonstrated with the grisaille, is dark and light. That's a value, the darkness or lightness. You have intensity. This is full intensity yellow. If I want to dull it down, I could add brown to it. And you can darken it also with a brown. You have tints and shades. A tint of a color, if I want to lighten it, I could add white. I'd make a tint of this, and would be pink by adding the white, and I could add brown or a darker color to make a shade of the color. So if I'm literally making a shading something to make a shade, I can add a darker color to it. The complement or black or brown. So if I have a yellow color that's too bright, I could add a little brown to it. I could add the complement to the yellow, which is purple, but that seems a lot too hard for me to do. Purple. But some artists do that. They only do compliments. I like shortcuts. I'm too lazy. I just use the brown. So I'm looking here at the light and dark patterns. That's all I'm doing. And very quickly dabbling in the paint where I think it goes, and it's not a completed project. I mean, not completed product at all. I'm not worried about that. I'm constantly adjusting, looking again. I figure I can always revise it. It doesn't come out, and I have to remind myself of that because I think everybody is kind of we all want it to happen right away. We're all impatient, I think, and I learned a lot of humility every day being an artist because it rarely works exactly the way I want it immediately, and I've been doing this for years and years.
How long do you, I mean, speaking of impatient, how long do you think it would take you to finish this whole painting? Like something like this?
I would say maybe 15 or 20 hours, something like that.
And you're coming back to this? Like, how many paintings do you work on at once?
Yeah, I would work on it. I work every evening. We sit here after dinner and I'm watching Netflix, of course, all the time now. Sometimes during the day, I'll work, but we're always doing stuff around the house and garden.
So you sounds like you set time for yourself at night. That's the
Yeah,
way yeah.
We kind of come up here and turn on Carol's reading something or doing crossword puzzles or whatever she wants, and watching movies and whatever. And I'm sitting there painting, working on projects. And if I get tired of the project, I put it aside, do something else. So I'm always doing something for a couple of hours a day about it. I used to paint when I was in college, I was so enthusiastic about these still lifes. I had dreams of being a full-time artist. My dad told me I was crazy. He was right. That's a tough way to make a living. Really, really hard. And some people do it. But most of the artists I know do some commercial work or teach. A lot of famous artists teach or were teachers. And they also have a lot of galleries, and they'll do art workshops. They can make really good money doing that. So gallery sales, that's kind of unreliable. You know, I've had years where I just, in the 80s, anything I painted is sold right away. It was the Zantman galleries. Everything I painted was the Shreves, sold right away, and then was down in La Jolla, and that sold right away. I thought, well, this is easy. I paint it, I sell it. It's just the time it took to do it. When I was going to school, I was in the dorms for a while, and I moved back home. I was dating Carol, and we were both in Burlingame, so I was at home. She lived with her mom in an apartment. I was living in Burlingame with my folks. So I'd go see her every day. We do homework. I come back, and I say, I'm going to work on my painting a little bit, and I'd be up all night. And I missed a lot of classes. But we were commuting together, so I made sure I was up to take her to class. And you'd find me sleeping in the hall, all stretched out. But in those days, you find a lot of students, probably today too, and stretched out on the floor.
Yeah, it's not totally uncommon. There was one of our viewers is she said you can paint and watch TV at the same time. So she sounds pretty impressed by that. Is that a skill that you've developed, or is that something?
And some people can't paint and talk at the same time. Some people they clam up. They cannot teach because you say, "Watch what I'm doing." I can't tell you what I'm doing. Don't ask me anything because I have to concentrate. One of my favorite artists is the lead artist. He's the head of the fine arts department in Academy of Art University. And no matter what you heard about them, it's a wonderful school. It's very legitimate. I went there when I was 8 years old. My dad put me in a life drawing class when I was 8 years old because he knew the founder, called Pappy Stevens. Now, Elisa runs it, and that's Pappy's granddaughter. His son, Richard Jr., ran it when I was there. He was taking it over. Pappy was a fine artist and a commercial artist. he started the school in 1929. His son Richard Jr. took it over, so his dad could retire. He ran it till his death. And the reason it got so big was because people wanted to go there. Okay, and and he wanted to offer an MFA or a PhD in art. But you started with academics, and then your final 2 years you did your specialty. Was, is it fashion design? Is it architecture, illustration? Is it fine arts? Whatever. A lot of great artists that come out of there, no matter what they say. I don't know what the problem is. It's very legitimate. It was terrific. It's not cheap, but what is, they've been in a lot of trouble with the city, and I don't want to get into politics. And in my opinion of the politics of the city, it's not very high. But I know it's a wonderful school. And the fellow who runs the fine arts department is a guy named Craig Nelson. And Craig Nelson, if you look him up, make sure you say Craig Nelson artist, or you got the guy, the Craig Nelson who's the actor. Craig Nelson is about 74 now, but he does a 1.5 hour tutorial every Friday, I think at 1 o'clock. He's on Facebook, YouTube and everything, and he's fantastic. He can talk and paint too, but he'll do, in an hour and a half, he'll do a whole painting. That's how good he is. But it's like an oil sketch, but it looks completed. I mean, on that screen, he's amazing. Much faster painter than I am. And he was a very well-known commercial artist in Hollywood. He did album covers, he did posters, and all sorts of stuff. And he was teaching, and he also taught down at the academy down there in Pasadena Art Center. And he came up here about 30 years ago. Lisa brought him up to spruce up the art department, the fine arts department, and he brought some other teachers with him. And he moved to Northern California. He and his wife have been a pair. So he'll have workshops in Italy and around California and Cuba. But right now, with travel restricted, he's mainly doing the Zoom, not Zoom. He's doing a Facebook Live. But it's terrific. He's a fantastic artist. And we showed our work together in a gallery in Half Moon Bay for many years, about 20 some years, called the Garden Gallery. And a fellow named Theron Cabridge and his wife Segun took it over back in the 90s. And I showed there. I was privileged to show with Craig and with Brian Blood and some of the other artists who were with the Academy. Theron recruited some of these fellows, said, "Do you want to show your work in Half Moon Bay?" And we had a very successful, long relationship with Theron and his wife. It was a small gallery, and Half Moon Bay isn't exactly a major art center, but I did very well there until the Great Recession. Everybody suffers somewhat, for good times and bad. And Craig did very well there, of course, and he does beautiful figures. He's fantastic drawing people. I mean, it's amazing because that's what he did. Landscapes, seascapes, animals, and he's so generous with these online courses. Plus, he has, you can buy videos of his work, tapes. You can buy books he's written. You could go to his. If anybody's interested, sign up for his classes, and we can do Zoom classes. I don't know how you do it. I think you have to be enrolled in the academy. Okay, Papa, it's okay.
Jared, he has. Do you typically go from dark to light?
Yes, I'm going from dark to light, and I'm always, when I'm looking, it's not so much trees or water. I'm looking at darks and lights. A lot of people get hung up when they paint water. I've seen over and over. They'll start painting this water blue. Now, is that blue right there? No. Is this blue here? No, it's dark green, right? Because water is a reflective surface. It's like a mirror. But they get the blue out and they make this water and it doesn't look right. Well, there's no reflection in it. But it's a left brain, right brain thing. Part of our brain thinks water is blue. Water is not blue. Water is clear, and it's a mirror, and it's in the ocean, the mirror is broken. The waves are broken. It's reflecting the sky. If it's a gray sky, it's a gray ocean. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just can't grab blue and get it right. And this is a very pale blue because it was a lot of clouds in the sky. Later in the day, it can be pink. And this is something you saw Monet doing. Okay, Papa. He's barking at a leaf blower.
I don't blame him.
Yeah. When he did his famous series of paintings, and he has them in the Orangerie in Paris, you take a whole roll of canvas and put it up there, and they do this immense mural-sized paintings. And what they are is looking into the water, and you look, there's clouds upside down, and it's like a late afternoon sky. And then another one over here, it's early morning. So he was looking into the water here, painting this part. He wasn't painting the trees, he painted reflections. He painted reflections, and then he painted the lilies sitting on top. Sometimes they were blooming with the pink. We were there in July, so in the springtime, of course, they're all blooming with the pink and red lilies, water lilies. So he was observing color. He was a colorist. He was looking at atmosphere. He was looking at, which is something that is the artists who were in before him would paint made from color notes, but if they wanted to darken a color, they'd put black in it or brown in it, and the colors were not vibrant. They didn't have the vibrant colors, as I said. They didn't came along the latter during the Industrial Revolution, and the chemistry was improved, and paints were improved, and everything, and people were experimenting. So he was using a lot of these what they call the Impressionist palette, which had purple in it, and it had some black. But when I've seen his paintings, I don't see black very much. I can see that he made purples, lavenders. He used the phthalo green. He would use the yellow color. He had a limited palette, but when you look at his paintings, he was laying color next to color, and it would sort of vibrate beautifully. And the poor guy could hardly see. It's pretty amazing. He had such terrible vision problems with cataracts. And finally, in the 1920s, I think he got one or both of his eyes repaired. And then they couldn't put a lens in, but he'd give you a real thick glasses so it would focus the light. Otherwise, it'd be all blurry. Get rid of the cataract, and the lens is gone too. Now they can put a lens in, so it's much improved. You have cataracts, but he did amazing work with the eyesight that he had.